18 players, and welcome to our Fantasy Breakdown Live. This is local football flavor, and for everyone who's watching us on the rebroadcast, there is significant value of talking to us live, as that's when you're able to get your questions in for us. So hit your notification button so you can see us. And Bob, I want to bring you right in here because I'm excited for the DFS lineup that you talked today that we're going to be able to discuss, as well as the potential trades that have been offered to me, at least in my league, some other things that are going on in yours. And I want to dive right into this with the DFS and your first lineup for your Thursday through Monday lineup, leading off with the quarterback of Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, so when it comes to the DFS world, there is a lot of different ways to play it, and you should really be looking for value, but you also want to look for matchups, right? So value and matchups are two things that you really want to go for here. And going through the list of players at this moment in time, when you are looking at quarterback, you can obviously make a big splash with someone like Jalen Hurts. You can make a big splash with a player like Justin Herbert or Tua. And there is going to be tremendous points scored in certain games. Tua's evidence of that this past week when they faced off against the Chargers. But when we look at how to build the lineup, and we've played around with this throughout the last couple of years, is that you've got to take value at one position, figuring out, is there a position that maybe there's a group of players that I can take a little bit lower in expense and build a lineup around. So where I started with this lineup is with Baker Mayfield. Now, I am not starting
Baker. Was this
Baker
mostly to save money to get a stud elsewhere in your lineup?
Yeah, exactly. And so what you're doing with a lineup with Baker, at least this week, Baker is fully capable of scoring against the Bears defense.
Everyone's capable of scoring against the Bears defense.
We saw what Jordan Love did to the Bears defense. He was extremely efficient. He threw for 3 touchdowns. And, in absence of a true running game for Tampa, like what the Packers had, there are going to be multiple opportunities for Baker Mayfield to be successful in this game. Now, granted, is he going to be the highest scoring quarterback this week? Probably not. But when you look at his price in comparison to other players that you can get, he has the best matchup out of those players. And mind you, this is going from Thursday to, I believe, Sunday on FanDuel. So it's the Thursday to Sunday.
This is the Thursday. This is
Thursday through Monday. Perfect. You're getting the ability to take a couple big boppers as players at other positions while still trying to maximize the total points that you're going to get in a given week. And like I said, I'm not starting Baker Mayfield on my regular team, but in DFS, that value is really too good to pass up.
That's exactly it. And before we go through the whole lineup, let's weave in some of the questions that we've been having here, because keeping the fantasy football, focus upon the whole league, I was proposed here a trade here, Bob, and I want to break it down with you and give you the scenario here. The guy who's trading me just traded Madison before the start of week 1, and his two starting running backs were Connor and Dobbins. So obviously during week 1, Dobbins gone, baby. Like that's no longer an option. So he proposes me the trade of Ayuk and Bigsby for McLaurin and Gibbs. I want you to noodle on that a little bit, Bob, because there's some moving parts, some goods and bads in both sides of that. I wanted to see what your gut feeling is.
So my initial feeling is to stay with what you have. Here's why. Gibbs it's been said by Dan Campbell that they are going to work Gibbs up into a role. Right now, what we saw from the Kansas City Chiefs was him playing the Chiefs, and, Montgomery was there a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And they
Which is
brought
concerning, so I'm willing to consider the strength, that Monty factor.
they brought Montgomery in to do work, but also to understand that Gibbs was told, and we were told that Dan Campbell is the type of guy that is, if they're winning, he's going to take the player that's helping them win.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that Gibbs can't be that player. It's that he wasn't really given the proper opportunities in that game against Kansas City to be that player. Likewise, Terry McLaurin is on an offense that is most likely going to struggle in a lot of games this year. Now, you like Terry McLaurin going into
I
the
like him a whole
season.
lot less after watching Sam Howell in week 1.
Yeah, going into the season, you liked him. Watching that game, it's not a lot. There's not a lot of meat on the table. If I was having anybody from Washington, it would probably be Brian Robinson, because he seems to work without including Sam Howell into the discussion, right? So with McLaurin, you have to rely on Howell. Is there a potential that Howell could come up throughout the year? Maybe, maybe not. Now, Bigsby, I think, is going to be a non-factor at this point in time. He scored a touchdown last week, that's true, but the way he played last week was garbage. The coaches did not like what they saw. He has a lot of room to grow. And if anything, that offense, that team will help him grow. But I think it's a big downgrade at the running back position for you there. Ayuk is the strongest player in the deal. That is apparent from what we saw last week. It's apparent from what we saw last year, where Ayuk was one of Purdy's favorite targets along with George Kittle. Ayuk manhandled the Steelers defense, and it's a lot. And when you look at the entirety of a season, right, how many touchdowns do you think Ayuk is going to score? He already has 2. So if you think that his floor is 10, right, well, you have 8 more touchdowns to split over a full year. If you think his floor in terms of yards is 1,200 yards, well, you have 1,000 more yards to spread across the entire year. So, I'm disappointed I didn't start him this week in our league, because I had Lockett and I had Devontae Adams going, because I would have won. But you've got to think, when he's already scored 2, right? He's already got over 100 yards. The capability of Purdy to get him there again on a week-to-week basis is there, but he's probably not going to have that high output as many weeks as you would want that to happen. He's probably going to stabilize somewhere in that 17 to 20 point range on a week-to-week basis. So do you think, because Tank Bigsby, I think, is a non-factor in the trade, I think he could grow, but again, the question to ask yourself is, do you think that Gibbs could potentially be a 10 to 17 point type of guy on a week-to-week basis? Because if yes, then you would want to keep Gibbs. If no, and you need wide receiver help because you don't believe in Terry McLaurin, because I think Terry McLaurin's floor, I mean, what we saw from him last week, what was his stats?
Well, here's the thing with me and Scary Terry is it's basically going to be a debate each week between him, Sky Moore, and Rice, the 2 Kansas City options as I see it, each week. And so, it's literally the other side. Do you have a good quarterback and bad receivers, or do you want a good receiver with a bad quarterback?
So,
it's a tough call.
Here's the thing with Scary Terry here. 2 receptions, average 15.5 yards per reception. So he's getting the ball. When he got it, he's got it deeper. The world up 202 yards, one INT, 1 touchdown. He threw the ball 31 times. So the targets are going to be there against bad teams. But
probably more so against good teams as they're losing.
Is it promising? Maybe not. So when you look at your total construction of your roster, it's number 1, can you afford to give up Gibbs? Number 2, if you give up Gibbs, who are you starting in? Who are you starting in his place? But also in your wide receivers. If it helps you clear up a decision that you have to make on a week-to-week basis, and you'd rather not make that decision and just stick Ayuk into your lineup, by all means, go
Oh,
for it.
it doesn't net solve that problem because Ayuk goes in Gibbs' spot as the flex. So
Yeah.
it's a spot
So
where
you
we can
still
dive
have
into
the
this a little
problem.
later. But I think that I'm with your initial thoughts there, Bob. We'll sit on it for a week and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, but I mean, the offer might not be there next week because, Ayuk could go nuclear again. But if Gibbs goes nuclear, you're just like, okay, I'm going to stick pat and I'm going to stay there. But
And
these
I
are
think
the
at this point, given the fact that I have the leverage because I have 4 running backs and he has 1, I think that's what I'm going to do. So with that being said, Bob, talking about running backs here, as you built your DFS line for victory across the full slate of games, you put some money into that spot, going with one of my personal favorite season-long guys in Saquon, man.
yeah.
And playing Arizona, it just might be play everybody. I mean, I kind of think that that's the realistic possibility. I got Saquon very high on my running back list this week, and I love to see him in your lineup.
Yeah, for me, this is a play where the Giants came out, the weather was bad, they laid an egg. Saquon still got 7.8 fantasy points in a complete dud egg of a game. There are going to be plenty of more opportunities against Arizona's defense. Brian Robinson, again, toted the rock 19 times for 59 yards. As I said, he's a plotter. Saquon is not. So there were 28 carries total in that game against the Cardinals that the Commanders had. Saquon Barkley is a 20 carry type of guy, right? Maybe even more. So he's going to be relied on in this game to get that ball moving, and then probably relied on this game to just run it out. This game will probably not be super, super competitive. But the way that Barkley and the Giants play, they want to run the ball. They didn't get a chance to do that last week. And this week is a perfect opportunity for them to do that. And when you look at the players that you can put in for the same value as Saquon, just going to it really quickly, you have CMC, Eckler, Henry, and Chubb. And, out of all of those options there at that top high end, it seems that McCaffrey would be likely to do it. But the issue is that Saquon is a little bit cheaper. He fits into the lineup a little bit better, and he has just as much boom potential as the next guys.
Yeah, I think that's something to really look at. And for those that caught us during our Tuesday live, this was one of the games, the Giants and Arizona being the blowout of the spread being wrong on the second most of the week. I don't know where the spread's at right now, but when we recorded it, it was at 4. And at that point, the answer was lay the points as a Giants fan because the Giants should be giving 7.5. Bob, I'm with everything you said there, that they're going to absolutely just destroy what we're going to see out of here. So let's go to your second running back for your DFS lineup here, Bob. Mr. Jamal Williams. We see him do a little bit of production here. What do you see of it coming out here with the Saints offense, long story short?
The price is a good price. When you look at the running backs around in this price, you've got Breece with a knee issue. You've got A.J. Dillon. You don't know if Aaron Jones is healthy. Dalvin Cook, Walker, Madison, and Najee. Najee threw up a stinker of a game past week. He's very untrustworthy at this point in time. We need to see what happens. However, the reason I'm really going with Jamal Williams here is the way that the Falcons played the Panthers, okay? You have a team in the Falcons that ran the ball 26 times. Both of their running backs were able to get 50 and 70 yards respectively. They won 24-10. The Saints are a team that has a very good opportunity to go up early in this game.
Yeah, that's true.
And if they happen to go up early and Kendre Miller is not in the picture, if he's injured, They're talking a little bit about an injury there. Jamal Williams has a great opportunity ahead of him because if you look at what happened last week to Jamal Williams, they played the Titans, who have one of the strongest defenses in my mind in the in that AFC South, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was struggling to get the ball moving, but he still was given the ball 18 times for 45 yards. Nobody else touched that. So even if Kendre Miller is a factor in this game, you could see potentially a split of 15-15, and Jamal Williams is perfectly capable of doing a lot with the ball. Even better for his prospects this week is that they're probably going to have more red zone opportunities this week against the Carolina Panthers. And red zone opportunities in Jamal Williams are like Christmas time and cookies.
Very nice.
So I'm going with Jamal. I don't think anything else needs to be said here. The value is pretty good. He fits into the lineup and fits almost like a glove. I think he's going to do really well this week. The optics are sound.
Yeah, I think that when we look at that Saints game overall, Carr getting a little bit more comfortable putting that ball deep. Carolina doesn't get anywhere near the pass rush that the Titans were able to put on them. And I just see it as, you know what? These guys are going to score. Bob, I think you nailed the game script because I don't see Carolina being able to put up points. Quite frankly, they put up 10 in the first half. It might just be run the clock out for the whole second half. And that's something that's completely possible. Of course, Carr will throw in a highlight bomb, but the rest of it will be pretty possible. It's just Saints are rolling. The Saints
I think so.
are coming. All right, Bob, let's switch over to your next one here.
So,
wide receiver Allen Robinson.
This is a value play.
Oh, $5.55. That's pretty cheap, yeah.
It allows you to do a lot with your lineup. And the reason I'm taking this play, it's not that it's like you're sitting there looking like, oh, okay, that looks gross, because it is gross.
Well, he's the number 3 receiver on the Steelers. Deontay Johnson, their number 1, is out this game. So you should assume an increase in targets.
Here's what I'm looking at. Exactly. He had 5 receptions last week, 64 yards, averaged about 12, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you look at it and you say, last year, Allen Robinson didn't do anything. Well, he wasn't really asked to do much as the 3rd wide receiver in this offense because Kenny Pickett wasn't really throwing it as he should have.
No, he's the most disappointing inaccuracy quarterback.
In last week's game, he threw the ball 46 times.
Mm-hmm.
That is a lot of distribution to get a hold of. We know Freiermuth is there. We know Pickens is there. As I said on Tuesday, Gunnar Olszewski is back. That ball is not trying to find its way Gunnar Olszewski's way. That ball's most likely that ball is most likely not going Najee's way a lot.
It's going to be the fill-in for Johnson.
It's probably not going towards Calvin Austin a whole lot, but it's going to get there. But Allen Robinson still has a big body. He still showed that he could catch the ball. He caught 5 of 8 targets. So the targets are there. If they replicate those targets again this week, it's perfectly possible. And we know that Cleveland's defense came and showed out last week.
That they did. They made Burrow look bad.
So this, as a value play at 55, allows you to fit the Saquon Barkley in, and it allows you to fit a higher value player a little bit later down the road. And you're probably 8.9 points. Yes, it's not a lot, but you throw a touchdown in there this week against Cleveland, this is now a play. And so it's not a nice, quaint play, but these are the types of plays that make you have chances. When you take
for someone who's like that cheap to see the opportunity, that's been the theme of your lineup here. If you're going cheap, get someone who has a great opportunity in front of them. You did that with Barkley. You did that here with Robinson, or Christian Baker and Robinson. Because with Robinson, again, He just went up from probably the fourth most targeted to third in a team that showed that they will hit the panic button, stopping the run if something goes sideways. And based upon Watson last week, there's a chance Cleveland gets up on Pittsburgh early and they get the panic throwing.
And here's the other thing. Joe Burrow didn't have a good game last week against Cleveland, but he did still throw the ball 31 times. And so that's a lot of opportunities. I'm there for the opportunities. I think Allen Robinson has the chance to turn those opportunities into points.
And the other thing is it's not going to be played in a monsoon, which should be highly noted. All right, let's get to your next receiver here, Bob. This one is perplexing to me. Kendrick Bourne of the Patriots, a passing game that we have just basically discarded since they don't have anyone worth throwing the ball to. And you go here and you take Kendrick Bourne. So what is the logic of taking the Patriots Bourne?
Another value play, but this one also for very good reasons. Last week, against what we think is a very stellar Eagles defense.
It is.
Mac Jones threw the ball 54 times.
That didn't make sense.
54 times. And Ramondre Stevenson still got 12 carries. They're facing the Miami Dolphins, who, let's go back and see how many times did they give up passes to Herbert here. 33.
Yeah.
Okay. Kendrick Bourne last week against the Eagles caught the ball for, let's see, he caught it 6 times on 11 targets for 64 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was the play that probably won you your DFS lineup last week if you played him. There is zero reason to think that amount of targets is going to change this week against Tua and the Miami Dolphins. Now,
well, they get a lead. If they get a lead, they'll try to run it out.
I don't think they'll get a lead. Is the problem?
Yeah, Miami will blow them out.
There is no way that New England gets and holds a lead with the way that Tua played last week. And to be quite frank, there's a pretty good distribution of, Ramondre went 6 for 6, Hunter Henry went 5 for 6, Demario Douglas went 4 for 7, Juju was another, 4 for 7 as well. But he's looking for Kendrick Bourne. Kendrick Bourne gives them a very good opportunity to be competitive in this game. And when you're sitting there and you're telling me that a guy who scored 21 points last week is still at 5,900 in your DFS lineups as a potential, and they're playing an even worse defense against the pass, at least what we saw last week with Herbie, this is a recipe.
Well, let's face it, Jones and Herbie are not exactly comparable.
I get it. But also it has to deal with scheme. It has to deal with player personnel. When you look at that game last week, let me go to the Dolphins-Chargers game here.
All they did was go back and forth the entire game and just who could score more.
It's back and forth. And you saw the highest targeted player in that game was Keenan Allen, who had 9 targets for 6 for 76 yards. So a very similar stat line for the number 1 wide receiver. Now, the only way that this doesn't happen, again, is if Mac Jones completely lays a stinker, which he could do, or they decide to go a Juju way, or, work on another wide receiver. But the way that looked last week against a very good Philadelphia defense was a little bit scary. And to see him priced at this point, and just as a note, you're looking at this price point, if you want to try to build another big player into your lineup, you're looking at guys with the name of Hollywood Brown, Isaiah Hodges, DJ Moore, Jahan Dotson, Addison, Christian Kirk, who got 1 point last week, Deontay Johnson, who's hurt, Josh Reynolds, and Puka Nacua, who is facing a better defense, right? So you would be tempted to put Puka in, but they're facing the Niners defense, and that's a tough matchup. So that might not happen. The value's there, right? The value's there.
I want to talk about two of those guys you just brought up.
Hold on, we got a question here. So it
my
says,
bad, I missed it.
need to pick QB for two teams. Teams 1 has Goff or Anthony Richardson. Team 2 has Purdy or Geno. To be honest with you, I love Geno, but that game was atrocious last week. I would tend to err on the side of Purdy here for Team 2. I think Geno could put up a good game. We talked about it on Tuesday, them facing the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions coming off a great win. Seahawks coming off a big loss. There's a good chance they rebound. But Purdy's just been solid. He's been solid. He's good for 2 or 3 touchdowns. Not going to probably light it on fire in terms of yards. But the Rams' defense is a beatable defense, despite
the downside with Purdy is he gets sacked, which doesn't really hurt you fantasy. Might hurt you winning the game. In fact, it could slow him down. But I agree with you that one, Bob, that you should take Purdy over Geno there. With the first set of Goff and Richardson, to me, that all comes down to Richardson's health. Because if the two of them are healthy, it's a no doubt can be Richardson. But I need to know he's healthy to go that direction. How do you feel about that list?
The matchup is good. He has a good matchup against Houston. And, even though Lamar didn't do well against Houston, he wasn't really asked to do anything. I think that the game this week, Houston versus Indy, is going to be slightly more competitive. And because of that reason, if Anthony Richardson is healthy, I play him. If for some reason you find out in the 9th hour, 10th hour that, Anthony Richardson is not good to go, Goff is completely serviceable. I think that Goff will probably end up in the range of like 230, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns. Nothing too crazy. And I don't think Anthony Richardson is going to go too crazy either.
I do think he is.
I think the stat line will be pretty similar. However, what Anthony Richardson brings you is the potential to have a rushing touchdown. And that's the reason you picked Anthony Richardson. And in the game last week, you were shown that he's willing to go for it even while they're losing. And I think that that's the quality about Anthony Richardson that's really good for fantasy. Maybe not real good for the team overall, but definitely good for fantasy purposes. So I'm going Anthony Richardson and Purdy. If Richardson is hurt, go Goff.
The other thing that I want to point out is that Houston's making a very clean run for the worst defense in the NFL right now. The fact that Baltimore had 3 offensive players get hurt and they still let up 22, including their left tackle. I mean, this is a situation where this could get ugly. And this could get ugly very fast.
Or it's a situation where you could say that Baltimore's in the running for the worst offense in football. But, we're not going to get into that at this point.
Baltimore's still middle of the road, but the fact that you couldn't slow them down with 3 missing offensive
Right.
It's very bad. So, yeah, I think Richardson's going to blow. I think Richardson's going to have a very good week. I think he's going to have one of these like, ooh, that was nice. Speaking of ooh, that's nice, Bob, who do we got next on your DFS lineup here?
So another value pick in that same range. In that game against the Ravens, we didn't really see a lot of good things from Houston. There was not anything really mind-bending happening in that game. However, what we did see was a reliance on Nico Collins. Nico Collins was relied upon to do work. Again, this is another Kendrick Bourne style play. He had 11 targets in that game, caught 6 of them, and got 80 yards and averaged about 13 yards on his catches. I like those numbers, especially when we saw how Indy was playing the wide receivers of the Jaguars. The Jaguars have a better quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, better wide receivers, absolutely 100%. But we also saw what Houston couldn't do well, and that was run the ball. When you can't run the ball, you're going to have to throw the ball. And, it's a very elementary concept to think about there, but we look at it and we said, Robert Woods had 10 targets. Nico had 11. CJ Stroud threw the ball 44 times in that game. Now, a lot of garbage time. I get it. I understand that.
Points, baby.
But points are points. And Nico has a chance to not only get that same amount of yards, but a touchdown because they play a weaker defense. We have another question here. Should I trade David Montgomery for James Cook? Yeah, I would. And here's why. When you look at what we were talking about earlier with the Detroit Lions, there is going to be a time when Gibbs is going to outplay David Montgomery.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, David Montgomery is the guy. In a couple weeks, he might not be. But what we saw from the Jets versus Buffalo game is Allen throws interceptions. If they want to win football games, and they've realized that, you've got to put the ball on the ground in James Cook's hands. James Cook.
The other part on that note from that Buffalo game I want to point out, when we were having all our preseason stuff, I thought Damian Harris was going to be a lead, borderline take over the job.
Non-factor.
Once. This is James Cook's team. If you can get someone to accept Monty for Cook, do it. And do it aggressively.
I mean, you look at it in a game where they turned the ball over. James Cook went 12 for 46. Now those numbers aren't necessarily like mind altering, and but you also look at it and he had 4 receptions for 17 yards. So he had a good game. And you go back to what Montgomery did, where you could see James Cook is their guy. Montgomery may not be the guy.
If Monty doesn't vulture the touchdowns, he's not going to be worth it.
Monty got 21 carries, which is a lot of volume, for 74 yards, and he also did not catch the ball. So you look at it and you say, if Montgomery can go forward as the season goes on to get more carries, but that split's going to come down sooner or later. And to trade Montgomery at his highest value, of course, he's probably going to do well for the next couple of weeks. But James Cook is probably going to do well in the next couple of weeks, particularly come wintertime, when they're going to have to keep the ball on the ground, and they're probably going to be milking a couple of leads. James Cook has a very good opportunity to get 70, 80 yards a game, maybe a touchdown in there. Damian Harris was a non-factor. Murray was a non-factor. It was Cook's backfield, and it is Cook's backfield to lose.
And to expand upon your point for this week in particularly, on our Tuesday show, we break down lines that are wrong and betting that where it should be. At that point, Buffalo was an 8.5-point favorite. In reality, they should be closer to a 3-point favorite. But the point remains, they're playing Vegas, and anyone should be able to run on that. And I do believe that Cook is going to have himself a pretty good game, and he might be your most improved running back in terms of on the ground from last week to this week. There's a lot of reasons to say, even though the ascending player is lower right now, jump, because those two are about to switch. They're like elevators passing in a shaft. Take the one going north, and that's going to be Cook.
And if you want another outlook on this right now for fantasy, for DFS lineup purposes, we have Cook going off at $6,600 and Montgomery going off at $6,300. So even just this week, there is a slightly better value to James Cook. And I think that's probably going to continue as the year goes on, because this team in Buffalo finally has what we think could be a good running back, and they're going to use him.
Yes, that's exactly it. And talking about players who go out and make acquisitions for players, your tight end here, possibly one of the biggest trades last year. I love the Hawk. I love everything about his game. We're starting to spend a little bit of money here, Bob, but not a whole lot, which means we're saving for a massive flex. But let's see what we're looking with right here with the Hawk. What makes you want to go into Philadelphia, short week on the road, and take their tight end after Jeff put up 1 billion yards last week?
I mean, we just saw, and this goes back to what I said about New England. We know that the Eagles' defense is good, but Mac Jones showed out. Kirk Cousins is another one of those guys that had a bad week last week. He had a real bad week last week. And yes, their defense is much better, but they're going to have to throw the ball to keep pace because Minnesota's defense is one of the worst defensive units in professional football today. And
possibly the best kept secret in the NFL.
Hurts is probably going to show out, but he's very, very expensive. Dallas Goedert, again, 0 points last week. A lot of these top flight tight end options did not do anything. Now, 7.5 points, you're like, okay, that's nothing to spend $6,600 on. But when you look at the other options, I'm just going to run down because I think this is the worst collection of options you could possibly have. You have Kelsey, who we don't know if he's going to come back for $8,500. Andrews, we don't know his health for $8,000. Waller, we don't know his health for $6,600. Hawk, Kittle had a terrible game. Ingram, Goddard, Henry, Freiermuth. Now, out of all of those other options, I might consider Hunter Henry again because he had such a good game. But Hawkinson, this feels like an opportunity in order for them to keep pace and for them to get the game script in their favor, that they're going to have to find him. And the linebackers for Philadelphia are very good. So he's going to have to get to the next level in order to produce, right? And so where we have Jefferson, who's going to open the top off on this defense, Addison's perfectly capable of doing that too. And when you look at where the scoring opportunities could go, there's a very real chance that Hawkinson can go for 2 touchdowns this week. Just the way that the opportunities are probably going to float his direction. You go from last week in that game against the Bucs, which was surprising in and of itself.
Yes, it was. Well, you're hit to the point of Cousins didn't look awesome.
No, that was a fact. But even in that game, Hawkinson had 9 opportunities, 9 targets, and he caught 5 of them. They didn't go anywhere, but the targets are there, the opportunities are there, and the Eagles' defense is a team that you can potentially score on.
It's also easier for a tight end to score on the Eagles because Slay will be on the number 1 receiver. And let's face it, he's the number 2 option until told otherwise in Minnesota. I know Addison scored a touchdown, but he has not surpassed the Hawk as the number 2 option in Minnesota.
Again, you look at it, Hunter Henry is not as good of a tight end as TJ Hawkinson, and he went for 5 for 56 for a touchdown. So doing less metrics on that one, but more just comparison, that the offense for the Vikings runs through Jefferson. That is obvious. It's apparent. But because it does, and because the Eagles secondary could potentially is going to focus on Jefferson, there's going to be a lot of field for Hawkinson, a lot of field for Addison, and that's where the opportunities are probably going to be at.
Makes sense. So let's get to that big money flex, Bob. Big money, no whammies. Does it matter who they play anymore? Well, it doesn't matter who they play.
I mean, I'm taking Hill here because of FOMO, more so than anything else.
That's fair.
You can't tell me that you don't try to put Tyreek Hill in your lineup. They play, the game that they play against the Patriots have a pretty strong defense, but it still can be scored on. We saw it again. Another, going back to that game, I keep talking about it because there's a lot of players to like from these games, and we can use what they did in, for history's sake here. You're going back to my Kendrick Bourne pick. Kendrick Bourne has, some skill, but he's not on people's radar. Tyreek Hill is overly on people's radar. And, you look at this game where the Eagles played the Patriots last week, and you look at the top wide receivers for the Eagles. A.J. Brown still got 79 yards on 10 targets. Devonta Smith got 47 yards and 1 touchdown on 10 targets. So there's still 20 targets they gave up. 20, and and 14 catches on 20 targets. If that is Tyreek Hill's possibility, 14 catches on 20 targets, because Jalen Waddle's a little banged up. They have Carcraft and whatever. But even if you just realistically cut that down to like 12 targets, he's probably going to catch 10 of them. And over 100 yards isn't out of the realm of possibility. And the fear of missing out that comes in here is that he's going for a record. And if you don't have him in your lineup while he's going for a record, forget about it. He was in my lineup last week. He's in my lineup again. He costs more this week, obviously. But you find a way to make that work, because he is the most explosive player in football right now. And to not have him in your lineup, even if he totally just shits the bed, right? You tried, because everybody.
You don't. It's walking out there with just the threat and the deterrent. And best part of DFS, you're not married to him. So through October, ride it while it's hot, baby. Ride it while it's hot. So then we're just going to have to round out your lineup here, Bob. And, this just looks like we have to put a defense out there. So give me cheap money, no whammies.
Yeah, they're a bad defense.
Well, they're not a bad defense.
No.
Cincinnati Bengals are not a bad defense.
No. I said they were a bad defense this past week to play, but not because of them.
Yeah.
This is a defense that is perfectly capable of getting turnovers. This is a defense that's perfectly capable of stopping the run, stopping the pass. And this is a defense that's cheap. And it's the best of this bunch. When you come in and you look at the lineups that other teams have to play, you don't trust the Steelers against Cleveland. You could, but I wouldn't. You don't trust Kansas City against the Jags. You definitely won't pick New England against Miami.
Nope.
No Carolina against New Orleans. Maybe Houston at Indy.
No.
You don't take Seattle against Detroit. Minnesota's the worst defense in football. Rams.
Seattle's the only one I'd push on you so far, but even that's I'd still rather have the Bengals.
And the Raiders against Buffalo. So the defense that comes immediately up top ahead of the Bengals is the Jaguars. You're not going to take the Jaguars against Patrick Mahomes. And the one right before it is 3,700. That's the Jets against the Cowboys. So you might try to figure out a way to put the Jets in there, but I wouldn't, because I think Dallas has a very good offense. And then and then at 3,800, you got Arizona against the Giants, only because Arizona went crazy last week. But you look at it, and the only other defense that you might want on your team this specific week would be the Chargers at 4,300. They play the Titans. The Giants.
Yeah.
The Giants, who play the Cardinals at 4,400. And Denver at 4,700 against Washington. And then the Niners at 5,900. So there's really only about 4 defenses to purchase this week that fit into a lineup. And the Bengals, while it's not the best matchup, again, Houston they got obliterated, but they didn't get completely lit up by Lamar Jackson. And, you look at it and you're like, yeah, Houston sucks. They played, they played the Ravens last week, but they scored 8 points fantasy-wise. They didn't get negative points, which was crazy to me. And so the Bengals are a better unit, and it's a good price. So you can't fight it, really.
Yeah, you can't. And to give everyone my suicide picks for the week, because I think that's important to do to let the viewers know where I am at. I'm on the Giants because I might just be against Arizona the entire year. There's a possibility of that. I'm on the Giants, and I'm on the Eagles tonight. I don't see a way where the Eagles end up losing this game. At home on Thursday night is already a tremendous advantage. You throw on here that Minnesota's defense looked horrendous.
It's bad.
And I think we're going to find out if Swift's any good as a running back tonight. At the end of the day, I think that's what's going to happen. I think it's going to be a good chance that Philly gets up early, and the second half is going to be, does Swifty stay Swift?
I have a very important question.
I'm ready.
Going through the rest of this fantasy season, which unit, pound for pound, snap for snap, will end up as the worst unit in football? Will it be the Arizona Cardinals offense, the Houston Texans offense, the Arizona Cardinals defense, the Minnesota Vikings defense, or the Houston Texans defense?
You might have said it in the inverse order there, Bob. I do think that Houston's defense has a chance of just basically being nothing. One of the things we talked about in the offseason, and this is going to be particularly a problem in Houston, is that something like 40% of their team was signed on one-year deals, and that didn't count the other players that were naturally getting to the last year of their contract. And it is very, very easy when you're in that type of situation where you're not coming back next year to basically do what Mariota did last year. Say, I could wait till the end of the year to get this surgery, but I'm going to do it in November. I could play through this injury, but I don't want to look bad on tape. And knowing that the Texans aren't going to really be playing for anything, I think that the quit factor into Houston's defense is drastically higher than that with the Vikings. And I think that cannot be understated enough. The Vikings will be playing for a wild card, possibly a division spot. So people will push through it.
I put this to you.
It's mostly a roster construction problem Houston put themselves in.
Here's a fun game we can play. Which unit will score? So you look at these DFS, you look at the DFS defenses and you ask yourself, as you go across the whole year, point for point, will the Arizona Cardinals offense score more fantasy points than the Minnesota Vikings defense? I'm just strictly positive.
It's almost impossible not to because of how slated it is to the offense.
I just feel that Minnesota's, what they put out on the field last week and what they put out on the field last year, I don't think enough people are talking about it with the fact that they're just not good. And Arizona obviously is not good either. And we think Arizona is going to end up at the bottom of the barrel this year in the league. It's just, I don't see either of them being able to score or stop people from scoring when it comes to the Vikings defense. So I'm curious if the Vikings defense will allow more touchdowns than Arizona actually scores.
Arizona scored against Sam Howell. I think that might be more a testament that Sam Howell's not ready.
No. I'm saying the offense, that the Arizona offense by the end of the year.
Oh, Joshua Dobbs is the worst starting quarterback.
Will the Arizona offense score more touchdowns than the Minnesota Vikings defense gives up?
No. Minnesota Vikings are going to be playing on average 14-point higher games than Arizona. So, yes, the Vikings will definitely allow more total points allowed than Arizona scores. That being said, the Vikings might allow more points than, three-quarters of the league scores.
So we have a question
here.
The
Vikings have possibly the best defensive coordinator in football. It's his first year there. There is no talent. And what got the Vikings through last year was their turnovers.
Joe, I'm going to stop you for a minute.
And the guys who made the pick left.
We got a question here. I'm going to stop you for a minute.
Sure.
Got a question. Full PPR, pick 2. Madison, Ayuk, Algier, Mostert, Herbert.
Ayuk and Algier.
Yeah. I mean, you can make a case for potentially Mostert, but in all honesty and full,
No, they're going for that record. That touchdown's going.
Algier is on a better running team. Ayuk is obviously the number one pass catcher for the Niners. Madison was a non-factor in the game they played last week. It's going to probably be a non-factor again tonight. Herbert was kind of outshined by Roshan Johnson last week, and then Mostert is who he is. I don't think that game's going to be settled enough that they're going to tote the rock. It's Tua's team. You're going to win and die by Tua. So in my mind, 2 full PPR, Tyler Algier and Ayuk are the guys this week for you.
I agree with that. But to include your point about the Vikings defense, Bob, you're 100% right. That they got to let up a lot of points this year. They're in a division that possibly could let up the most points of the 8 divisions, top to bottom. And when I look at this and say their whole talent was based upon picking the ball off last year, mostly by Patrick Peterson being gone, a lot of those interceptions left their building, and they're just.
You're welcome, man.
No problem, Joker.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. I just can't get. I can't get over the fact that, like, we talk about Justin Jefferson as being, the best. Like, they might have the best player from a skill position and the worst unit. Like, it's mind blowing to me.
It's still not as bad as the Texans defense. Well, like, I got to put it this way: the Texans could have played anyone else last week, including against the Giants in that rainstorm, the Ravens could have played anyone last week, and they would have lost that game. The Ravens played the one unit that they could have beaten last week, and they got so lucky with the schedule. Like,
it felt like
work anywhere else.
It felt like the expectations of my fantasy team, and then them all coming out, and like Devontae Adams is like, "Oh yeah, I'm just not gonna play the way that I used to," and Tyler Lockett's like, "I'm not gonna play the second half," but that's fine.
That Adams is gonna be something I'm gonna keep an eye on this week for fantasy purposes, because this is really a showdown week for him. He's got a chance to go against one of the other best receivers in the league, and
he's hurt.
Out and show that he is. I get it, but it's week 1, a little early to be hurt.
Well, I mean, he has a foot thing. He's not like hurt, but Jacoby Myers is not playing. So this is the time, Adams. This is the time. That's all I'm going to say about that.
What do you think about that tight end that they got out there in Raider world, Mayer? Given the fact that the other 2 are out, or even a Renfro play. What do you think about that?
I don't like either of them. I mean, Mayer is. I mean, they're both good enough, but Jimmy G's hurt already. Adams is hurt already. So, I mean, I think that's going to be a Jacobs game, personally. If it's not an Adams game, it's going to be a Jacobs game. And it just feels like when you look at what happened last week, and you look at the way that Jimmy Garoppolo just kind of locked in on Jacoby Myers, and he was open, and he was making great plays the entire game. But here's the thing that we all lose, is that Denver actually does have a pretty good defense. Denver can stop you from scoring. They might still let up like 16, 17 points in a game, but overall, the unit itself has a decent bit of talent there. It's well constructed. So I think that Adams just maybe, they were keying in on Adams a lot in that game. He wasn't able to get loose and he still had 66 yards. So for the Raiders, let me look up the targets though, because I am really curious about how the targets were spread around in that game. So Jimmy G.
That was a weird game to watch when you looked at it, because it felt like if Denver was good, they should have taken over. But they never really did. It felt like a Jimmy G game when you really watched it.
All right.
He was the one who was controlling that game, not Russell Wilson.
This is exactly the Jimmy G game. Ready? Jimmy G went off for 20 for 26, right? So that's like Desmond Ritter style, like, completions. Jacoby got 10 targets. Devontae had 9. The next closest was Josh Jacobs with 3.
Yep, that sounds like.
So for me, at the very least, if you're run Devontae Adams if he's healthy. You bought him at a high value, run him. For DFS purposes, I wouldn't, just because you don't know the health. And unfortunately for Jacoby, he's probably going to be out. But that just means that those targets are going to go to Adams. I don't even think they're going to be absorbed by Renfro or Mayer. They're just, I don't think those guys are on Jimmy G's radar, to be honest with you. And Jimmy is the type of quarterback that once he finds the guy, a la Aaron Rodgers, right? Once he finds the guy, that's his guy. And he's going to use him and utilize him well. And then he has a second guy, and he's going to use him and utilize him well. If Hunter Renfrow is in the game, maybe he'll, and Jacoby's not, maybe it will turn out. But I just, the Raiders have a good chance to show out this week against a beatable. If they can get turnovers from Josh Allen, that's going to be.
It's going to be interesting because I don't think the Raiders' defense is very good either. I mean, Max Crosby's great, but the other 10, not so much so. But
Josh
changing gears on you here a little, Bob. Do you think that the Green Bay offense is sustainable, or is it just we always destroy Chicago, so that's what we did? Like when they goes to play someone else other than the Bears, is Love going to be a viable option when it's all said and done?
Yeah, I think so. I really do. As you look at what happened in that game, as the game went on, he got more confident. He had more time. He had time to throw the ball, and this is when 2 wide receivers that he's just starting to build rapport with Dobbs and Reed. Watson was out. We know that Watson doesn't have always the most faithful hands, but he can open the top off on defenses. If Aaron Jones, and this is a big if Aaron Jones stays unscathed enough from the hamstring injury, you have a really good chance to have a really balanced offense that Aaron Rodgers was able to capitalize on a couple years prior. But this past year, with the injuries to Rodgers and to everybody else, we didn't really see the MVP caliber out of Rodgers, and we got a very pedestrian season. You look at the season that Rodgers had, you look at the season that Love had. Love is going to be startable in a couple of games this year. Love definitely has that startable capability. I mean, heck, he had 3 touchdowns last week, which would have been better than most of the quarterbacks that we all started last week anyway. So you look at it and you say, okay, well, is there a chance that he could be successful? Absolutely. Dobbs can roll. He got hurt, but he can roll. Watson can do the same thing. Reed showed something. And then you always have A.J. Dillon in the backfield with Jones if something were to happen. Now, I don't like A.J. Dillon as much. I do have him on my fantasy team. He's on the bench. But he might become startable if Jones goes down and stays down for a while. Mm-hmm. And the Packers, they're a team that can score. They're a team that moves the ball. And their defense does struggle to stop teams. So the ball is going to get back into Love's hands a lot of times as the year goes on. And, just to look at his numbers, again, the Bears aren't a good metric for, what's going to happen later here. But he did throw the ball 27 times. He only completed it 15 times, which is not great. But even those 15 completions, like I said, for 245 yards, 15 completions for 245 yards, you decide to play because the first half he didn't play as well. You look at it and you say, okay, are you able to put together a whole game? And those 27, you get that completion total up to say, like, let's go 23 for 27, something like that, or 22 for 27. You're going to get solid numbers. Mm-hmm. Because if you're throwing the ball 27 times a game, there's a good chance that you're going to complete at least 60% of those, because he's not as bad as, let's say, Josh Dobbs.
Yeah, Josh Dobbs doesn't belong in any comparison. He just doesn't.
But the touchdowns did save his week. I was expecting 2. He got 3.
Mm-hmm.
Every week's not going to be like that. There's going to be a lot of growing pains, but I think by the end of the year that we're going to realize that he's on your radar next year as a solid second quarterback option, potential starter on a week-to-week basis. This year, he'll have those games, but you're not going to be confident starting him unless it's against a bad defense or unless your starter is on bye or goes out.
Yeah, so you're forced to start him.
Well, here's the thing. If you're hitting the panic button on Joe Burrow early,
you shouldn't.
I'm saying if you're hitting the panic button, you're not trading him, you're just not starting him. Mm-hmm. Love is probably a guy that you picked up this past week. It's probably
and that makes sense. So
we have a question here.
We got another question thrown away here, Bob.
Would you trade Hollywood Brown for Elijah Moore? Yes. I mean,
it's a whole lot of not awesome there, Alex. My long story short is no. Even though Hollywood is in an offense that is horrendous, I mean, there's just no way around that. He is by far and away the lead dog there. He's in a team that's going to have to throw the ball due to virtue of them losing constantly. And I've never been a fan of Elijah Moore's game at all. And I'm definitely not a fan of the way Watson threw the ball last week. This has now been since his return, he's been looking horrible.
So for me, Joe.
So you drafted Kupp and you need someone in that flex spot. Yeah. I'd keep Hollywood in the flex. I mean, that would be my answer, Alex.
This is where I fall on that. I think they're about this. I think they're about the same usage with the quarterbacks that they currently have. Dobbs against the not so stellar, Commanders defense. Dobbs didn't play well. He didn't throw any interceptions. He had 3 fumbles, but he didn't throw for a lot of yards. And if you have a team with a pass catcher, and we saw this with Drake London, who's one of my favorite players, going into the season, on a low volume passing attack, it's going to be a struggle. I don't think until Kyler comes back, I don't think that Hollywood Brown has a tremendous amount of value. But this is a pretty much an even trade. Hold on. This is an even trade to me. I would say go with your gut with the offense that you think is going to do better over the next 3 weeks. Because if Kupp comes back and he's healthy, he's immediately in your starting lineup. You don't even have to worry about Hollywood Brown. You don't have to worry about Elijah Moore. So if I were you, I'd take a look at what the schedule looks like for the next 3 to 5 games and say to myself, do I think Josh Dobbs has a better chance of getting the ball to Hollywood Brown in these games? Or do I think that Deshaun Watson has a better chance to get to Elijah Moore? Because he targeted Elijah Moore 7 times. Hollywood only got targeted 5 times this past week. They both caught it 3 times. Pretty much even in my book. If I'm going to...
this is the thing moving forward that would concern me more about Elijah is, first off, he's not the number 1 receiver on his team. And second, Cleveland has a chance of actually winning and leading games. And the Nick Chubb factor is real. I mean, Nick Chubb can literally just have the ball every play for a quarter. And then you just don't get it. Arizona's never going to be having a lead like that. And at some point, Dobbs is going to get comfortable. Remember, Dobbs only been there for like 2 weeks.
Well,
Dobbs
here's the thing.
Get comfortable with Hollywood, and it's going to work out.
Here's the thing, too, Joe, is that Alex just brought to us his wide receiving core. Kupp, Wilson, Williams, assuming Mike Williams, Dobbs, and Brown.
You just picking everyone is going to get hurt, bro.
This wide receiving core, If Dobbs is healthy, I would play Dobbs. I think what we just said about the Packers. I think there's better scoring opportunities for it. Keep Brown. If he hits, he hits. But he's probably more likely going to have a lot of bad weeks until Kyler comes back. And even if Kyler does come back, or doesn't come back, like Joe said, he has a chance to build rapport with Dobbs. There's a good chance. The worry for me at this point in time is Wilson. We drafted him as a potential elite top 5 option. We drafted him knowing that Aaron Rodgers was going to be his quarterback, and we get Zach Wilson. If you're nervous about the wide receiving core because Kupp is out, Wilson still at this point in time has a little bit of value. I wouldn't jump ship on him yet, but that would be the one player out of those 5 players that has value that you could potentially trade for something else. Because let's remember, Zach Wilson didn't throw the ball to Garrett Wilson last year. It wasn't something that he liked to do. It wasn't something that he could do. But again, Garrett Wilson is the best offensive weapon outside of Breece Hall on that team. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate you have to rely on Zach Wilson. The only thing that we could come across is that Zach Wilson outproduces, has a good season, and you don't have to worry about anything in the end. But yeah, it's unfortunate about Wilson and about Kupp because those two guys, their talent level should elevate their teams to the next level. But, you get hurt and you can't really do anything about it, or your quarterback goes down. You can't really do anything about it. Williams, though, complete wild card. He had a bad game.
Trusted Mike Williams the most of that group. Without a doubt. Mike Williams should be.
Oh yeah. I mean, Alex, to your point, if Wilson finishes top 20 like he did the previous year, and he finishes at wide receiver 17, you didn't draft him as wide receiver 17, unfortunately. But if he gets anything upwards of wide receiver 20, I'd be happy to, because that means you're getting a solid floor every single week. But yeah, a lot of people got boned week 1 for sure, 100%. I just love seeing the teams that started Burrow and T. Higgins. We were talking up Higgins this past year, and the opportunities were there for Higgins, but that just didn't. Burrow had a bad game, and that's but not talking
here's
about.
The thing, to finish the Garrett Wilson thought here, you're going to get the answer of what he is this week. You're not going to have to wait around with this. They're playing the Cowboys.
Thanks, Alex.
I
appreciate it.
Are going to tell you exactly what Wilson's going to be for the rest of the season. Either the Jets are going to implode and Wilson is going to become worthless, or they're going to do everything they can through him, throwing through a pretty decent pair of corners to force it to him. You're going to find out what the Jets are committed to. Granted, the new offensive coordinator from last year, Wilson knows he's playing for his career. So therefore, it's much more likely the production goes to him, because when your life's on the line to play here, you're not giving the ball to Cox. It's just the way it is.
Here's the thing,
he has to throw it. But you're going to find out if this is like a hypothetical, will it work or not? The Cowboys, for what their defense is, will tell you black and white. This is a viable option for the rest of your fantasy year, or this was a wasted second-round pick. And you're going to know it by the end of week 2, which in some ways is very nice. In some ways is horrible.
Here's what I hope. RG3 said it pretty well. They said the Jets are tied to Wilson now, because you're not going to go out there, pick up a quarterback off the street.
How many, Randy?
You're not going to pick up a wide receiver, or you're not going to pick up a quarterback off the street because they don't know the team. Zach Wilson knows this team, has been able to build rapport in the offseason by working with the players. You can't go out there. Zach Wilson gives the Jets the best chance to win in an unfortunate situation. Let's hope that the guy is better than what we saw. He's not going to lead the Jets to the promised land, but he could give Garrett Wilson a really good season. So Randy has a question here. Elijah Moore, Dotson, Zay Flowers, or Zay Jones on the flex PPR. Now, that's a really tough decision. That's a lot of...
That is. Zay Jones, I did not think was going to be relevant, and he is throwing me off.
I would go with Flowers.
See, I would have picked Dotson. And the reason I'm leaning Dotson is this, is with McLaurin having that toe injury, Dotson got a lot of love. And there's no indication that he's going to come back. Zay Flowers and the whole Baltimore passing game is going to figure out what life's like without a left tackle. And there's a very good chance they Baltimore it up and just start running the ball again. So
but here's the thing, Joe. The Baltimore offense is not good in my
That's the other
mind,
thing. He's got
enough.
a foot and
But
Surtain.
here's the thing. Yeah. I mean, Dotson has a good chance to output a very good week this week. But Zay Flowers, when you go back to what was going on last week, in that game against Houston, he saw 10 targets. Mm-hmm. And for a rookie wide receiver to see 10 targets early
That's
on
crazy.
in the season is really crazy. And he caught 9 of them. Okay? And, you know, Randy will know this. You know, that's why he's in the discussion
Andrews
here.
Now. Andrews playing?
But, again, even if Andrew's playing, they are going to be able and going to have to pass the ball. I'm not relying on Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. And if anything reminds me of, you know, they had their coaching staff last year in terms of offense wasn't very good. And it's a changed lineup, changed staff. But Zay Flowers has a really good boom potential this week. Elijah Moore, again, you know, there's a chance against the Steelers defense that he shows up. You know, not a huge fan. Yeah, and Randy, you're absolutely right. You know, they did say that they were going to divide the targets more, but what we saw from Zay Flowers is that it was Zay Flowers' tryout against Houston.
That's
fair. He came out and he did what he was supposed to do. And I don't think that, you know, even if you're dividing the targets up, I don't even think you could take that away from him. And even if he gets 7 targets, 6 targets, he's perfectly capable. He showed you in that game against Houston of catching 5 of 6, 5 of 7, 6 of 7, 4 of 7. And Lamar is going to get it down the field. This game is going to be a little bit tighter. Zay Jones, again, we didn't talk about Zay Jones. He was not the guy that everybody was expecting to be the number 2 in that.
I don't think he's going to be the number 2. I don't think Christian Kirk's going to disappear.
I'm not saying number 2 as in like their number 2. I'm saying number 2 in like catches and points, right? Mm-hmm. It was a good game It was a good game. They're playing the Chiefs. That game, the Chiefs are going to come out mad. The Chiefs are going to come out and play. Lawrence is going to have to be in this game and throwing the ball a lot. Etienne's is going to have to deal with Jones. Lawrence is going to have to deal with Chandler Jones is back. I think the best option in this order is how I would put them. Zay Flowers, I would put Dotson next. I would put Moore, and then I would put Zay Jones. That would be my order.
I think that's the way to do it. And Randy, for our betting stuff, watch our show from Tuesday. That has all of our betting answers in that.
Yeah, 51 over and under. I mean, that's a high. That's a high over and under. So
but while we're talking about Kansas City here, Bob, is any of those receivers going to step up? And if so, which one?
Kansas City?
Yeah.
God. I mean, I hope it's Sky Moore.
Yeah, me too.
But I equally hope, because I have him, Rishi Rice. I hope that they keep giving the ball to Rice because he did show that he has the potential to do really well this year. We know that it's not going to be Kadarius Toney. It's not. I mean, he's done. The fact that he went out there and did that primetime first game of the season with the best quarterback in the NFL, it's not a thing. Mahomes looks like he likes Rice. I'm very curious with when Kelsey comes back and healthy, how the distribution of targets will go. Just like we said about Baltimore, with Andrews coming back healthy, how is the distribution of targets going to go? How are they going to share the mouths? Because Rice seems like their new guy at wide receiver, the guy we thought Sky Moore was going to be.
Well, he caught the touchdown. He didn't get the volume share. Moore still got the volume share, and on that final drive, he threw it to Moore.
I get it, but Moore still, I mean, the jitters were real.
Mm-hmm.
The jitters were real. That whole, I mean, that they were like, I know Patrick Mahomes throws it to his wide receivers, but that it's the Travis Kelce effect that a generational player like Kelce gives so much in terms of blocking, offensive talent, and he makes that team just completely different. That when he's not there, you've had him there for the last how many years, right? You've had him there. You've had him as a stalwart. You had him blocking. You had him catching. And when he's not there, dude, that team in the Chiefs, they looked just off. I don't expect them to look off this week. And I do expect Rice to have a good game. I do expect Sky Moore to have a good game. And I expect Tony to be on the bench or traded by like week 7.
I don't know about traded. I don't think they're going to trade away from them, but being fantasy tradable and fantasy useless, I do think that's.
I mean, he's not fantasy tradable. He's droppable.
That's fair.
He's
Bob, I think that's going to conclude our episode here. We hope that everyone enjoyed the DFS. Again, if you're watching this on replay, check us out live next time. Put that little notification for local football flavor so you can get your questions in. Earlier in the week, Tuesdays are going to be our betting days, and ideally the Thursdays are going to be the fantasy days. So we will see you guys then, and we'll go from there.